Well, good afternoon. Welcome to today's session, which is anxiety tunnel vision, clearing the fog in some of those high stress environments that you guys are experiencing. My name is Holly Foxworth. I'm a registered nurse, and I'm also the Director of Marketing Communications here at Axiom. I'm going to be your host today. So I am especially glad that you guys had joined. I've been looking forward to this webinar to have Dr. Les Kertay back with us. He's been out for a few months, so you guys are going to get to meet him again here momentarily, but this topic really hits so close to home for so many of us. And when I say that, I'm talking about myself as well. But it's like when stress starts to really kind of narrow our focus, we start to lose sight of some of those key details. We start to make rash decisions. We lose the bigger picture. And so that's really what our mission is today. So our session is really about understanding why it is that that happens, but then more importantly, how it is that you can kind of reset and clear that fog out. So for those of you who may be new to Axiom, this is your first webinar, you're not familiar with us, we provide occupational health services across the United States, Canada, and Mexico. So that includes work-related injuries and illnesses. We do behavioral health and along with employee absence management. So we like to keep about 75% of those cases in-house at a first aid level, saving our clients lots of time, money, lost productivity, but most importantly, we like making you look like the heroes that you naturally are within your organization. So we are thrilled that you are here today with us. So we do have a fantastic panel that I've referred to. We're going to have Dr. Les Kertay, and he's going to speak to the science actually behind tunnel vision, how the stress really impacts our thinking. And then Dara Wheeler is our Chief Marketing Officer and EVP of Product Innovation, and she works directly with organizations on building resilience and teaching some of those leadership practices that work in the real world. So we're tickled to have both of them. You're going to meet them both shortly. But before you do that, let's talk about everything that you're looking at here on your platform. So the first thing I'm going to draw your attention to is the upper right-hand side. And so you should see I think it's a purple box, and there should be a red box right below that says RSVP. So that is your ticket to next month's webinar. We're going to have that on October the 16th. That will be at 1:00 p.m. Central. The topic is obviously top of mind that everybody's been discussing lately, but we're going to be discussing AI and safety and how it is that you can really streamline some of your responsibilities. So we want to talk about how it is we can make your lives easier. We want you to work smarter, not harder. So we do have an additional panelist that's going to be joining us from Flex Systems. His name is Calvin, and I think that you guys are going to really enjoy what he has to share as well. So if you haven't already, make for sure that you click that button right there to reserve your seat for this next month, and you don't have to fill anything else out. You'll get a confirmation email, and that'll be added to your calendar. But for the rest of you, we might have seen you recently. We just returned back from the National Safety Conference, and so we were participating in the expo there, and we also had a happy hour event, so we saw a lot of you there at that. If you missed it this year, make for sure that you attend next year. We had an absolute blast, but we do have several events that are still coming up this year. We have 2 more trade shows. We'll be heading this next month to Louisville, Kentucky for the Utility Expo, and then in November we'll be going to the Work Comp conference there, and that will be in Nashville, Tennessee. I think it's going to be the first time I've ever been to Nashville, unless that's close to where you're located at. Yeah. If you will be in any of those locations, I hope that you'll stop by the booth, say hello. We love to take pictures, talk, chat, and we have some great swag that we can share with you as well there too. The next thing that you need to know about is how it is to participate in today's discussion. So we like to conversate back and forth. We don't like to do all the talking. We like to know what's going on in your environment, what kind of questions that you have, what you're seeing, etc. And just kind of here's a secret insider tip. If you like gifts, that the way that you get those after these events is that you go down to that box and you communicate with us there in the box. There's 2 boxes that you should be seeing there at the bottom of your screen. The one on the left that says Q&A box or ask us questions, something along those lines. That's what I want you to utilize whenever we do polls. We're going to do some interactive case studies, things like that. If you want to tell us something, if you want to ask the speaker a question, utilize that. If you have a story that's happened in your workplace or with you individually that you want to share with all of our audience, use that middle box, and that everybody will be able to see what you've shared. So anything that you want to put in there is great. Again, there's no bad questions, and we love to hear back and forth. So be sure to participate in that. The slides are definitely located there on the webinar console. So if you miss something, don't worry. We will send out a replay of that within the next 24 hours is usually when those go out. So with that being said, let's go ahead and meet our panelists. Dr. Les Kertay, we'll start with you.
Well, thanks, Holly. It's great to be back here, and I will actually see you guys in Nashville. I'm so excited because I'm going to be at that conference. So
how exciting!
I haven't seen you in forever.
Are you speaking at that conference, Les?
I am speaking at that conference.
You are? Wow. Yeah. Okay.
Well, you'll have a cheering section.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Really awesome. Sure. Either that or heckling. We'll see, right? So I'm Dr. Les Kertay. I'm a clinical psychologist by training. I have been Senior VP for Behavioral Health at Axiom. I'm currently consulting and just available. And obviously my area of expertise is mental health, but specifically I've spent the last 25 years really focused on workplace mental health. So that's what I bring to the table.
He's brilliant. And I love the way that he speaks. He just gives you this calm, we're going to do some exercises later, and it just makes you feel better just hearing his voice. Dara.
Hey, everybody. My name's Dara Wheeler. I've been with Axiom for 19 years. And why that matters to me is I love our mission at Axiom and helping our clients and their employees survive the workplace, make sure that they are there, make sure that they are both mentally and physically able to perform the jobs and feel satisfaction at the end of the day. And as much as we feel, I think, a lot of satisfaction in supporting our clients through any challenges they're facing. So I'm really happy to be here.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both. We're tickled that both of you are here today. So let's kind of walk through what it is that we're going to be going through specifically. So you kind of have an idea. We're going to go through obviously what tunnel vision is under stress and why that happens. We're going to be talking about some of the risk, and that includes not just the safety, but it's also performance impacts or behavioral things, leadership, etc. We're going to talk about how it is that you can recognize some of those warning signs. And then in addition to that, we're going to do some practical resets. So I think that's the part I've been looking forward to the most, and that's the part we'll be doing at the end. But really what we want you to do is we want to be able to give you some tools that you can use today, not just in your workplace, but also in your life. So before we get started, we'll start with just a single poll. And remember, this is where you're going to answer with the left-hand box that's there. So I want to ask you guys, how often do you feel like that stress narrows your focus and kind of clouds your judgment? How often do you feel like that stress narrows your focus and clouds your judgment? Would you say that's rarely, sometimes, maybe often, or almost daily? And while we're waiting on your answers here, Dr. Kertay, I'm actually going to ask you the question since you're the doctor. Hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. I mean, the way that we typically talk about this is that when things are stressful, when there's just a lot going on, that our focus gets narrowed, and we don't pay attention to the periphery. And it's often we talk about it as if our frontal cortex, our decision-making abilities get closed down. It's actually not quite true. What's true is that brains can't multitask. Like when your kids tell you that they're multitasking, they lie. What we can do is switch between one thing and another, and that's what our brains do, is tell us what to pay attention to. When there are 20 things going on, all of which are demanding attention. What's happening is that we keep trying to focus on the thing that's important, but we get distracted. We get pulled in lots of different directions. And that's what makes it problematic, because we get overwhelmed. We don't know where to pay attention, and we miss things.
Yeah.
And that's the real issue. That's what makes it a safety risk.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you've ever been driving and you're really overwhelmed and you're thinking about something else, you are not paying attention to driving. You're more at risk.
Absolutely.
That's what's happening in this.
We've had a lot of answers that came in. The majority I'm seeing here are saying nearly every day. There's a lot of everydays, but there's a lot of nearly everydays. Would you say that's what you're at as well, or where would you go with that?
Yeah, I mean, we
Yeah.
have in our notes we have this statistic that, you know, Gallup found that what was it, 44% of employees have daily stress, and I would say the other 56% are lying. Yeah.
I love it.
I mean, you know, I do this sometimes when I'm presenting. I'll ask people, you know, like, raise your hand if you haven't been stressed. And there's one person always that's a smart aleck in the audience. But, you know, we've all been stressed. Work has gotten stressful. We've
Absolutely.
been, for years and years and years, we've been trying to do more with less. And that has a cost when it gets to a certain point. Stress by itself is not a bad thing. When we get overwhelmed with stress, when there's too much going on, we begin to lose the ability to make good decisions.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. Well, kind of when we talk about, some of that stress that's going on, and we talk about what's really happening in the brain, talk to us about how is it that you can unpack some of that information, like what actually is happening behind the scenes that we may not always understand, that's making us feel that way.
Well, I think it's that thing that I was talking about, that we get pulled in multiple directions and we're not actually capable of doing it. And so our attention keeps bouncing in different directions. And it just creates more stress. It's like, now I don't know what to do. If you've ever been in the place where you get anxious enough that you can't make a decision, you don't know where to start, and so you just sit there. That's actually what's happening. Is not that you're shut down. What's happening is that your brain's moving so fast it can't decide where to land. And I think that is, that's the state that we can get in. And the only way to deal with that is to begin to back off of that and get some perspective. It's really hard to do when you're in the middle of it.
Absolutely. Would you say that, so then are you explaining then that the reason that we start to see small is because we have so much that's going on around us? Would that accurately describe it? Okay.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Think of it this way, that, if I'm able to focus on something, it takes up all of my attention. I'm focused in, I'm zeroed in, I'm in the zone, I'm working on it. When I have 50 things going on, I've got all of this noise out here. And so now this place that I'm supposed to be paying attention is tiny in comparison to all of that noise that's around it. Mm-hmm. That's the problem, that Gotcha. We lose the ability because we keep getting pulled into all of the noise, and we lose the ability to kind of stay in that place where we need to be.
Absolutely. The other thing I was going to ask you about was, we sometimes hear that that stress is always a bad thing, but are there times when it can be helpful?
Well, yeah. I mean, when I sometimes teach a psychopathology or abnormal psychology class at the university, and I always, my discussion of stress is the only organism that is not stressed at all is one that's dead.
Oh. Makes
right?
sense.
Stress is simply being pulled out of a state of equilibrium. When I'm
Mhm.
hungry, that's a stress, right? I need that stress because otherwise I wouldn't eat.
Yeah.
So, right, it's a natural reaction. Stress is something that motivates us to fix an issue or to return to balance. The problem isn't the stress. The problem is that when it comes piled on top of one another and it keeps building, and now I can't, I begin to lose the flexibility. I begin to lose the ability to respond, or it's coming so fast that no sooner do I settle one stress and I start to relax. That's the normal process. I'm hungry, I eat, and then I relax, right? Well,
Yeah.
if that's the normal process, well, if I get stressed and I settle something and I start to relax and then right away there's another stress, here we are, right? We're into this escalating cascade, and eventually, we can do some serious damage to our bodies. We begin to actually break down if it's bad enough for long enough.
Wow.
Um,
So, if that's what's happening then in the brain, how is it that we would be able to spot that in real time when that's really happening?
that is the
It's
tricky
a million
part,
dollar
right?
question.
Well, so I mean, there's a bunch of different ways that we can talk about it. Um, Part of it is that the time to learn how to manage stress is not in the middle of a crisis. The time to learn how to manage stress is to plan, to have coping strategies, to plan in breaks. Um, Everybody says, "Well, I can't take a break. I'll fall behind." I promise you, if you don't ever take a break, you'll fall farther behind. Um, we all know this, but then we don't do it. Um, so how do we tell? People differ. For example, I know when I'm overstressed because I feel it in my chest. My breathing gets tight. That's where I feel it. Other people, I've heard people describe they feel it in the pit of their stomach. I'm like I'm getting tied up in knots. So paying attention physically to changes that tend to happen when you're stressed is a really good is a good trick. I know when that's happening and I'm starting to breathe really shallow and really fast, I I need to step away.
Absolutely.
Um, those so physical cues when I if I'm staring at the screen when I'm working and I can't figure out what to do next for longer than about 10 seconds, I know I need a break. Usually it flows, right? I'm working. But when I get stuck and I can't, I don't know what to do next, and I find myself just staring, that's a clue for me. People have different clues. I'm giving examples of that. Um, what's the other thing? The other thing that I'll do is you can't see me do this, but I start my hands going back and forth on my leg. I'm rubbing my leg, right? That's a that's a clue. I Sometimes people like fidget. They bounce their leg. You know, Maybe that means nothing. Maybe you're just a fidgeter. But if you know that that's associated with you being stressed, then you pay attention when
Mhm.
that begins to happen. So you learn your own cues. Notice that's why you don't do this in the middle of a crisis because you can't. You have to learn to pay attention to those things ahead of time. I, I need to know what my cues are so that when they happen in the moment, I can pay attention.
Absolutely.
Um,
Would you say that there's some behavioral things that you might see in addition to that, besides just what you experience about movement and things like that? Would you feel like that? you'd maybe see some irritability, or what type of changes
Yep.
might you see there?
Yep. Um, you can see almost any number of different sort of emotional responses under stress. So I'm not normally an irritable person, which means for me that if I'm working and I'm suddenly getting really snappy with somebody, I know that I'm stressed, right? Other people are just kind of always crabby. For them, being irritable is not a big deal, but maybe for them, if they start to feel really tearful, that might be a clue. I'm the opposite, right? I'm not typically irritable and I cry at the drop of a hat, right? Hallmark commercials get me every time. So for me, that's not a clue, but being irritable is. For other people, it's the other way around. So, all those kinds of behaviors, and importantly, those behaviors can really get in the way. If I'm in a meeting, like it's fine for me to cry at a movie. I don't want to be crying in a meeting. I certainly don't want to be irritable, right? So my emotions begin to run away with me, and that also. Here's a thing that I say about brains: like, emotions are deeper in the brain than our conscious thoughts. If there's a battle between our emotions and our cognitive processes, the emotions win every single time. Because they're more primitive, right? They're deeper in the brain. They will take over. And so if I'm finding myself really emotional and I can't do anything with that, then I'm paying attention. Now I know myself well enough to pay attention. That's part of what we need to learn about ourselves so that we learn these cues.
I love when you talk about baseline, and we've talked a lot about that over the years, that somebody's baseline really matters, because to your point, that if we know Les's baseline is not to be irritable, and all of a sudden Les is being irritable, we know that there's a kind of a tipping point. But I also think of it as the stacking, to your point about it's the multiple stressors and moments that stack. And so what I'll find myself, it's like that last thing. And that last thing is usually minor. It's not the thing that is really that big of a deal. But because the moments have stacked and I've let them stack, that last thing is always kind of that, oh, there's the tipping point. And usually it's with my kids. And I'm,
Right.
usually at the end of a long day and trying to do the one last thing on my phone. And of course, a child wants attention and is going, Mom, pay attention to me. And that's that last moment of like, I really feel it and feel myself snapping at a kid who's just like, hey, Mom, I'm home now, pay attention. But it's because I've let all of those moments in the day stack. And it's that final little thing that really has nothing to do with the anxiety or what's been going on. And so that's the way I always think of it too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There was a great question that had came in, Dr. Kertay, and I was asking, do you think that people are better at identifying stress in others around them than they are within themselves? And how often does stress of others around you impact your own stress levels? Great question.
Wow, that's a multi-part question.
Yeah.
There's a part of me that wants to say, are we better at identifying stressors in other people? Is like, I think we're better at identifying other people as the problem than ourselves. So that was partly where my brain went. It's like, I do think that the second part of that is really important, that stress around us makes a huge difference. And we've all had that experience. I mean, you walk into a room and there's a meeting going on and everybody's tense. We feel it right away. And you spend enough time in that kind of an environment, and it does begin to get to you. I think that our tendency when we see somebody else being stressed is to we have there's multiple things we might do. The thing that we probably don't do often enough is to say, you know, hey, you seem really stressed. Are you doing okay? Right? We don't talk to people. We sort of either avoid them because they're stressed and we don't want to feel it, or we blame them for something. There's two ways. If I get irritable, to your point, Dara, if I get irritable in a meeting, there's two ways to do it. One is, yell at me like there's something wrong with me, which is not going to help. And there's, wow, you don't usually do that. Like, how are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
And notice my tone of voice when I do that. I'm not being accusatory. I'm saying, hey, I just saw something in you. I'm not used to that. Are you okay? Is a worthwhile conversation to have with people around you.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure I'm answering the question entirely, but that's a big topic.
Yeah. I was going to say, we've laughed about some of these things. I think my husband can tell when I'm more stressed than even whenever I can, and that's the first thing he's doing is trying to feed me or put me to bed. Put yourself to bed sometimes. But, I definitely agree with you, Anna, that sometimes it is easier to see some of that stress that is piling up in other people more so than
I call it treating me like a toddler. When I am really stressed and tired and it's like, give me the juice box, send me to bed. I treat me like the 2-year-old because I'm a toddler that needs to go to bed.
100%. Well, in terms of, you often talk about that there's a lot of things that stress is or tunnel vision is. There's a lot of myths that are here. So Derek, what would you explain, or what would you tell leaders that maybe isn't quite accurate, and walk us through kind of what some of those myths would be and what would be appropriate?
And I think Les has talked a little bit about the fact that even the idea of tunnel vision is a little bit of a misnomer. Maybe it is, when we think about it, it's not necessarily bringing it into a narrow focus. It's just trying to bounce between foci, or trying to really just, what am I supposed to focus on? So I think the myth of it only happening in extreme crisis is interesting because like I said, it doesn't even necessarily have to be extreme or big issues. It could be little things stacking throughout a day that are things that you just feel like you don't have control over. A lot of this is, for me, it's a control issue. And go figure, I'm a bit of a control freak. And so if I feel like I have a lack of control over my day, what I'm doing, what's going on, then those things stack for me. And so I think the myth that it's like some big crisis, for me, it's not usually the big crises. I usually feel pretty good in the middle of a big crisis. Like, I know how to handle that. And Holly's an ex-ER nurse. I can bet you if a big crisis happens, Holly's probably going, I got this. This is, no problem. But it's those little things sometimes that you can't control, that you are struggling with, that can really bring this into focus. Les already mentioned taking breaks, the idea that you don't have time to take breaks or can't fit that into your schedule is really the opposite. The more breaks you can take, the better. And anybody who trains or works out, this is a lesson that I have to teach myself every 6 to 8 weeks because I hate taking breaks. But every time I do, I perform better physically. It's the same thing at work. If I take a break, I come back better, more engaged, ready to go, and ready to tackle what's in front of me. The fact that strong leaders should never show stress is definitely wrong. Although to Les's point, this is a gray area of should a leader sit down and start bawling in the middle of a meeting and crying when they're stressed? Probably not. Handling emotion and coming up with ways to productively, kind of think about how you handle emotion before you get to that point is probably a good thing. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't acknowledge when things are hard or that you shouldn't acknowledge when you are stressed. And I know, Holly and I have worked together for a very long time through some very stressful moments that I will no longer name, like, good old COVID days. And those days, we got to a point where we had to really check in with each other because the amount of stress that was facing all of us in those moments, personally, professionally, was a lot. And so if you don't acknowledge your own stress, it's really hard for your team to know how to move forward. Although, like I said, probably don't put everything on your team either.
Great point.
Right.
Great point. Yeah.
But you raised a really good point, Dara. I think that knowing how to name what we're experiencing does two things. One, it puts a little bit of distance between us and it, but it's also really useful for the people around us, especially if we're leaders. I really agree with you. It's like, I want to be able to say what I'm experiencing and not just fall apart.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think what happens is that we think that, well, if we show any emotion at all, we're going to fall apart. And so we try not to, and then it either explodes or it leaks.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that has been something that even for somebody that's really spent a lot of time thinking about emotion and working with people like you, really calling it out and understanding it. If somebody asks me to call out what I'm feeling in a moment, sometimes that is impossible. It's really difficult. And especially the English language, we tend to stick to angry, sad, happy, like really basic emotions that I'm like, in other languages, they have some pretty cool nuances for different emotions. But it was really interesting to me also that if you're a leader or you're working with teams and you think you're hiding what you're going through, you're not. Or if you think you're hiding who you really are, you probably aren't. I had somebody say to me, I'm back to my control freak comment. I do like to manage things and control things and organize. And if I feel like people aren't playing along, I get a little frustrated and intense. And somebody said to me, why pretend like you aren't intense? You are an intense person. Why pretend like you're just going with the flow and totally cool? And I was like, I had this persona of going, yeah, I'm totally fine with not choosing the dinner location for tonight. And they said, well, why even pretend? We know you. We know how intensely you want to manage this. So just own it. And I went, oh, okay. Yeah, I'm going to just own it. So I think sometimes when we get in those moments of trying to pretend like we're not feeling something or that's not who we are, that causes more anxiety and stress than just saying, yeah, I really want to control all of this.
That makes so much sense. Zach had a really good question that then he had asked, how do you name it if you don't know how to articulate what you're feeling?
Tell you what I've done. I had somebody actually give me a sheet of emotions. So I put it on my fridge, and it was a sheet of 200 emotions. And I put it up, and I would, if I was feeling something, I'd actually look at it and go, what is this? Because sometimes I hadn't practiced that. And it was such a funny moment because I'm sitting here, a 40-plus-year-old woman going, how do I not know how to name something when it takes practice? Mm-hmm. And then if you have children, seeing it through their eyes is helpful because then I can help them name it. And so that's taught me a lot. But I seriously printed out a piece of paper, put it on my fridge with all these emotional descriptors and things just to help because it's not easy. Sorry, Les, if you have any other ideas, go for it.
No, actually it actually is perfect because if you take that list and organize it, and you label the category first, because what you started to say before, mad, sad, glad, scared. right?
Hmm.
Basically, all of the different nuanced emotions fall into those categories. If you can name, most of the time, we can name the category, and then you kind of work your way down. Like mad. Okay, well, I'm just kind of crabby. And that list that you're talking about of 200 words is really, really helpful, because then you learn to talk about the nuance, and you learn to talk about it when it's small before you're going to explode. So I think it's really helpful. But if you're really, really stuck and you don't know where to start, just start with the big categories. What flavor is it?
Great recommendation.
Um,
Yeah. Well, we do have an interactive case study. So we're going to give you kind of a scenario here, and you tell us what it is that you would maybe do if you were in that situation. So what would you do as the manager? So say that you're maybe a plant manager and you're under pressure. You have some malfunctioning equipment that's going on. Somebody's raised a safety concern. What are you going to do at that point? Are you going to push through it? Are you going to halt production? Or are you going to try to find a middle ground? And this is the part where you can put those answers there on the left-hand side of your screen in those boxes there. And then we're going to talk through the different selections here.
While we're waiting on some responses, it looks like somebody joining us completed a mental health first aid response certification and really loved the content, and it went through a lot more types of mental health than they expected. Are you seeing more trainings like this offered in workplaces, or do you think trainings like this are beneficial? And I would, it's a great teed up question for Dr. Kertay.
For sure.
yeah, I mean, yeah, a lot of people will know that I'm a huge fan of mental health first aid as a training, mostly because it helps us learn that. I have to tell this in a little bit of a story that, you know, we're really used to when somebody asks us how you doing, we say fine, right? And if we ask somebody how you doing, fine. But when somebody does not say fine, like, actually, I'm having a really hard time, most of the time people panic.
Yeah.
It's like, oh God, what do I do? Well, mental health first aid training is really ideal for helping us to know what to say next, right? So that so it's not so scary, because what people need most of the time, what we need ourselves, what people need from us is contact. It's just being in the room with somebody. And mental health first aid, I think, is a huge part of building a culture that helps us do that for each other. So I'm a huge fan. Are we seeing more of it? I don't know how to answer that question. I mean, not as much as I wish. How's that?
There could always be more. Absolutely. Well, we've had a lot of, looks like that we have some answers. Some are at middle ground and some are at halt production. So Les, talk to us about what the correct answer is and how we sometimes arrive at that.
Well, the part of this that's important is that if you don't halt production, you create the opportunity for people to get hurt. And that's the right answer, even though you don't want to, because halting production might get blamed for it. But finding a middle ground when there's a risk that people are going to get hurt, or that the machinery is going to break down, and you're going to do a quick fix and try to keep it running, and then it's going to break down again. That's like I can't afford to take a break. So if you have this, what we ought to do is stop, deal with the problem, fix it, and then move on. And that, I think, is the right answer.
You are correct that that's the right answer. For those that came to the decision of middle ground, what is that an example of, or what is that telling us?
Well, it's a great example actually of, if I'm in that situation, I'm imagining myself in a situation where there's production problems
Mm-hmm.
and I'm under pressure to keep production going on the one hand, and I'm under pressure on the other hand to keep people safe. And it's really tempting to try to do both at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's the more stress we're under, the harder it is to make the call of which of these two things is more important.
Mm-hmm.
Meeting my production goal or making sure that people are safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. I mean, to me, the obvious answer is keep people safe.
Mm-hmm.
But when I'm in the middle of something where there's these competing pressures, it's a great example of why, we're stuck not being able to make a decision that really is obvious.
And it makes sense. You don't want to disappoint. You don't want to disappoint
Right.
what operations is expecting of you, but you also are thinking about your employees. Absolutely, I agree. Well, so if that tunnel vision is kind of pushing us maybe towards some of those choices that aren't the best, then talk to us about how it is that we can clear that out. If we recognize that we're in one of those situations, what is it that we need to do to say, hey, whoa, I've got an issue here. What do I need to do to fix it?
I love this. I love this model, and the labels under it is just perfect, right? First thing to do, take a breath. I promise you, if you're in a crisis, I promise you, you're not breathing effectively. Stop, take a breath, identify it to the best of your ability, what it is that's going on, put a label on it. Again, notice that by taking a step back, identifying what it is that's happening, I've just put just a little bit of distance between me and my, kind of compulsive response. Now I've got in that gap, I've got the ability to expand my awareness, to think through what it is that's going on and what are my alternatives, and then decide what to do. But by the way, people leave this out of the decision tree a lot. Like, you can't just solve the problem in your head. You have to actually then do something. You do it after you've figured out what the problem is. You act, and then you reinforce that whole process. It's just I don't know. I would take this. In fact, I like this slide so much, I think I might just print it and put it up above my desk.
We appreciate you saying that. What would you say are some of the types of resets that you could do? Like, are there different recommendations of things that you could identify or things of that sort?
Well, taking a deep breath is the first one. Just stop and take a breath. Stop and stand up and turn around. As silly as that sound, right?
Really?
Just, as silly as it sounds, just stand up and then, turn your body around. Just make yourself do something that breaks this kind of tunnel vision on, oh my goodness, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So anything that creates that break just momentarily is the place to start. You can then also do more complex kinds of breathing exercises. There are grounding exercises that we can talk through. I don't I want to make sure that we're, mindful of time and whatever questions we have, but we can kind of go wherever you want with this.
Yeah, definitely. Talk us through maybe the grounding exercise, and then and what I'd really love is maybe after that, then you walk us through one of the reset sessions. Maybe take 60, 90 seconds and something along those lines, and actually experience that.
Okay. I'll actually start with one that's really, really simple, which is called box breathing, right? So it's taking a single deep breath, however you do it, without thinking too much about it, is the easiest place to start. But then if you can take like a minute and just control your breathing, that will calm your nervous system. So box breathing is simply breathe in to the count of 4, hold it for a count of 4, breathe out to a count of 4, hold it out for a count of 4, and just do that a few times. You can do that for a minute and create a whole different kind of level of nervous energy. You can just take the edge off of it a lot. So, start with one breath, and then do some controlled breathing. This grounding exercise that we talk about a lot is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, right? So identify. Let me say first, what this is about is it's about getting ourselves to focus elsewhere so that we can then come back to the thing that's the problem. And you want to do that briefly, but you want to take your focus off of the crisis, or whether the crisis is real or imagined. You want to take your mind off of it for long enough to come up with a good solution. So identify 5 things that you can see. Look around the room. I have a trick. Everything in my office that is at eye level is something I like to look at. So that if I am, if I'm really having a hard time with something, I just look anywhere in my office and I see something that I like looking at. It's calming. So look around the room, identify 5 things that you see. Notice 5 things that you can feel. Right now, I feel myself sitting on the chair. I feel my foot on the ground. I feel my elbow resting on the armrest. Right? Just any sense of feelings. And notice what's happening here, right? You're distracting yourself into paying attention elsewhere, and what I'm doing is putting my mind on what's going on around me and in my body. 2 things you can smell, right? I'm sorry, 3 things you can hear, sounds that you can hear. I can hear the air conditioner running. I can hear my own voice in my ear. The dog just dropped a huge bone right outside my office door that I heard. 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell. Smells are harder for some people. So all you got to do is identify 2 of them. And then 1 thing you can taste. And you can either just pay attention to the actual taste in your mouth, or you can take a sip of water, or take a mint, anything that you can give yourself to pay attention to. And walking through that doesn't have to take a long time, but what it'll do is it'll help ground you in what's real. And now I can come back and pay attention to what I'm trying to work on.
Mm-hmm. There have been some great comments that have been coming through here. I love all the things that you guys are sharing. One of them that I hadn't seen either, but they were talking about spicy foods and things like that. I think there was one I saw that said the hotter the better. When they were talking about Taco Bell, he said I grab a Taco Bell pouch and I keep them in my car and at my desk and in my pocket. I've never heard of that, but I mean, it makes so much sense, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great. That's great. Sure,
There were,
because it'll focus you on your senses.
yeah. There was other ones that were talking about
Love
crunchy
that.
food. Yes, I really like that. Absolutely. Looking outside at nature. That's another good one. Dr. Kertay, you used to always tell us that um, you keep your shoes out there and you take a walk.
Ah,
I remember you
yeah,
telling us
yeah.
that, and keep your shoes there and take a walk. Share that with them so that they can kind of have
Well,
that
just,
as well.
I know that, I happen to live across the street from a little park. I know that it takes me just about 35 seconds to be out the front door and walking across the street to
Mhm.
to walk in the park. I keep my walking shoes next to me. I happen to not wear shoes in the house most of the time, but I keep my shoes right here so that I know that if I'm really overwhelmed and I need a break, all I have to do is put them on. This is it's a key thing about doing things that are good for us. Whatever you make 30 seconds easier to do, you're more likely to do it. So my shoes are here. I'm much more likely to put them on and go walk. If they're downstairs and they're not right next to me, I'm much less likely to do it.
Hmm.
So I make it easy to do.
Makes
Um,
sense. Makes a lot of sense. I was going to ask you if you would actually practice, kind of lead us through a reset exercise. I know that we've still got a few minutes that are here, and I don't want to take time away from other questions that have been here. But if you could walk us through what that looks like, or have us
mm,
participate in some type of a reset exercise.
yeah. Okay. Sure. So let's have people experience what that countdown feels like. How about that? Um, so what I want everybody to do, whatever the environment that you happen to be in, take a minute and just pay attention to first off, pay attention to your body and pay attention to kind of what it is that's going on. Are you enjoying this? Are you arguing with us about this and telling us, well, yeah, that's all fine and dandy, but I have a real job. I can't take a break. Whatever it is that's going on, just notice it. And then just open your eyes and look around the room and tell yourself 5 things that you can see. Just pick them out. And then talk to yourself, tell yourself 4 things that you feel physically. If you're not used to doing this, sometimes it's awkward, but if you pay attention, it gets really, really easy because there's always stuff that's going on that we black out. And then 3 things that you hear. And 2 things that you smell. And if it doesn't come to you, then maybe you have a cup of coffee or I have a cup of tea on my desk. Just deliberately smell something, right? and then one thing to taste. Holly reached for a Coke. I love that. We know that's what you'll go to. And now take just a second and notice how you feel in your body now compared to where you were when we started. Has it changed? You know, it's a little hard to know. I deliberately didn't ask people to think about something really, really stressful to start with, but you could have, you know, to compare the two. But even walking everybody through that process, I found myself doing it, and I'm calmer.
Yeah.
And how long did that take? A minute, you know, a minute and a half, maybe. I mean, it doesn't take a long time. And this, you know, back to the myths that Darrow was talking about. I mean, the big myth that we can't ever take a break.
Yeah.
You know, how much more productive can you be if I take up 2 minutes out of every hour to just stand up, to walk away from my desk, to, you know, turn myself around. You see, that seemed like a revelation to people, you know, just like just do something different. Our problem is that we are so afraid to take breaks that we think that if we take a break, that we'll never stop. You know, it's like, if I ever stop, how many times have we said to ourselves, if I ever stop, if I ever sit down, I'll never get up.
Yeah.
If I stop, I'll never get going again.
We know if Holly goes on a cruise, she might not come back.
May not come back.
Right.
She may be gone, and that's okay.
She may be gone. Well, Dr. Kertay,
Holly takes enough cruises so that she doesn't have to take the one cruise that makes her never come back, right?
Well, the exercise, this has worked well. We've had lots of good comments that have came through. Lots that were sharing that it even made their heart rate feel like that it came down, that it made them feel a lot better, etc. So that is fantastic. I love hearing that feedback. That's excellent. Dara, wrap us up with kind of talking us through then what leaders can do to kind of build resilience over the long term, you know, what it is that we can do to help.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about resilience. Again, it's a theme that I don't think ever really goes away. And thank you all for participating. And I do think we've said take breaks. Sleep is always really, really important to build that habit. It's something, if you all have heard, we've been hitting that really hard in our topics with Dr. Cherry. The data around fatigue is really startling. So please, like, make sure that you're building that habit into your life. Like I said, I am clearly a toddler who needs to be put to bed sometimes, and I think we all are. So consistent sleep helps you deal with anything kind of thrown your way. Scenario planning can help, although, you know, if you're a control freak like me, scenario planning might be too much of an exercise and utility, but just keep making sure that you help your teams reset, you know, call it out, what you're feeling, making sure that, you know, you can even do pre-shift huddles. I know that a lot of you are in the safety space and HR space, and trying to just do a quick reset or, you know, supporting your teams through institutionalizing breaks is a great approach. So if, you know, you kind of force it on everybody to take a break, then you'll help everybody build some more resilience. So those are some of my suggestions. Holly, anything you would add?
You know, one of the things that you actually have us do on our team that I think works so well is that in the beginning of the year, we all have to at least plan out some kind of PTO. So it's like you're intentionally making sure that you're going to take a break there. Les, I don't know if you had anything that you wanted to add to that as well.
Don't send emails after hours.
Oh, good one.
Don't check emails after hours. You know, I understand that there are times when people have to be available, but you know, I think we've gotten to a place where we're all working 24 hours a day. And you know, I think it's worthwhile asking yourself, you know, is there really a crisis if I just ignore that particular email? I,
Good points. Well, we are at time. I appreciate all of your comments. I'm loving watching all of this. And thank you for the kind words. I'm so glad to hear that you guys have enjoyed this and that you got far more out of it than even what you thought that you were going to get. So that is fantastic. If you haven't already, make for sure that you press that RSVP button so that we can get you signed up and we can talk about AI and safety this next month whenever we come through. And again, if you are in Louisville, Kentucky, we hope to see you this next month. So thank you and have a great day. Thanks for attending.
Thanks, everyone.